Welcome to the JD Power Travel Podcast. I'm Michael Taylor. I'm the Managing Director of Travel, Hospitality, and Retail JD Power. And I'm, as always, joined by Andrea Stokes, who's our practice lead for hospitality. Hello, Andrea.
Hello.
Anyway, so, first off, just kind of off topic here, Andrea, you've gotten some accolades lately. And I actually say this because I saw your this really cool artwork of your portrait, in the news. And tell us a little bit about one of the recent awards you won.
Well, I was selected late last year as an influential woman in hospitality. So very grateful for that. Very much appreciate that. And that was bestowed by Hotel Management magazine and website, which is run by QuestX. So very much appreciate that. And I did submit a recent article to the Hotel Yearbook about 2023 and what we're looking at in the hospitality industry in terms of both the guest and hotel owners and operators and sort of their mindset and what they're thinking about how 2023 will play out.
Well, the artwork they have for that yearbook thing looks like you're a member of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I'm wondering when your movie is going to come out. So maybe you can give us a little synopsis in a future podcast of what your movie's plot is going to be.
Okay, sure. I like being a superhero. So yeah, I like that idea a lot.
All right. Well, actually, on to the business at hand here, the real world. And I thought we would talk a little bit about. Everybody has this anticipation. A lot of companies, including JD Power, go through planning the last part of a year and then into the first quarter of a year. And that's certainly what JD Power has been doing. And we're all sort of bracing for some bad economic news as we go through 2023. And, for lack of a better term, we're calling it the expected recession. But I thought we would spend some time talking about, as JD Power sees it, what's the expected impact or lack of impact on travel for the upcoming recession. So, Andrea, what's your outlook for the impact or non-impact of the recession on the hospitality industry?
Yes, well, I think it's hard to know if we are in one right now. Certainly, travel prices have abated a little bit, but they are still quite high. Hotel prices and airfares, especially for spring break, are quite high. I myself could not use the airline I normally would use because the airfare was double what I found on another airline for spring break, this upcoming spring break. And so I think companies are competing and they realize that there are, competitors out there that they need to beat on price. But I think the demand is still there. And I think as long as airlines and the hotel chains are seeing booking demand still there, especially for spring and summer, I don't think prices will come down. Now, if a recession hits us, say it's the summer time frame, much of travel for the summer may have been booked already by then. I mean, a recession might impact, last minute decision making by consumers on taking a trip, and they might decide, not to take that trip after all due to, potential layoff or something else. But, while we've seen layoffs, I don't think the layoffs have been recession-like quite yet. That could change, of course, but we're not really seeing, widespread layoffs. And in fact, companies are still hiring, not only in the travel industry, but many other industries. They're still looking for workers. And workers, do have kind of an upper hand because of that. So, yeah, I think it remains to be seen. I think by the time June rolls around, we'll probably understand whether we really do see a recession, perhaps in the third or fourth quarter.
Yeah, that'd be my estimate as well. It's just as an armchair economist. So, from my sides of the business, we touched a little bit on airline fees, and airline fees are quite high for particular destinations for two different reasons. One is that demand factor. And I believe, if I'm not betraying too much, you were looking to go to Florida with your family on spring break, if I remember correctly, Andrea.
That's right.
And the particular market you were looking at is a really high demand, and the prices do reflect that. They're something like double what they normally would be during a spring break time frame. But you'll go across you look at going to Atlanta or Chicago, not necessarily spring break or leisure destinations, and airfares haven't changed that much from their current levels. They're certainly higher than they were in 2019. But the other factor, demand is one factor. The other factor is routing. Airline stocks are doing quite well and actually becoming quite efficient at producing profitability in 2023 and actually all the way through 2022 as well, simply because they're flying fewer aircraft and putting more passengers on them, and of course getting that higher ticket price to certain markets. And they've also restricted the flights to various smaller markets. I flew to Indianapolis last week, and it was quite a bit more than flying to any other market I normally would go to, say Houston or Chicago, and simply because that's just not a market that attracts a lot of business travel or leisure travel at all, and therefore is priced accordingly. And I actually didn't have, even though I paid a higher fare, it was the least heavy flight I'd been on, with the fewest amount of seats filled. So, in fact, I didn't have anybody within probably 6 rows of me on the outbound leg, but I did pay quite a bit more than I would pay, say, to go to Houston Airport. And the other swing factor here is business travel. Which, Andrea, I want you to chime in a little bit on things that you talked about yesterday in a webinar that you did with U.S. Travel Association and Ipsos. But that is also somewhat of a swing factor here is the lack or the lagging of business travel as we go through 2023, and for some unusual and some usual reasons. And then one of the bigger swing factors for some of the airports that we track at J.D. Power is the resurgence of travel out of China, especially business travel, which has been heavily restricted in the past year. So, Andrea, I know that you participated in this webinar yesterday, and maybe give some of the highlights that you talked about yesterday with the USTA.
Sure. We did talk a little bit about the quarterly business travel index that we produce alongside U.S. Travel Association and Oxford Economics. And we do plan to continue that work in 2023. It's a quarterly survey of business travelers and business executives about travel spending, the types of business trips they're taking, sort of comparing to the past and how much companies are sending their employees on business travel. And, as of the end of last year, fourth quarter of 22, business travel was still at about 80% of what it was before the pandemic. So, still down. Different types of business trips are being taken. It's really transient business travel that is still slow to come back. And we've said that before. Business travelers are traveling for meetings and events, and those meetings and events and conventions, conferences, those are coming back. They came back in 22. I think more will come back in 23. But business travelers, they still believe that if travel is a part of their job, they believe it's important to their own development, but also the company financials, that they should travel for business. And that not traveling would, potentially have a negative impact on companies' sales or revenues, that kind of thing. So, interestingly, business executives, they agree with that, but they're, I think, more policy focused, corporate travel policy focused, and which travel policies have remained since during the pandemic. Trips are being scrutinized a little more in various types of companies. So there's still those kind of negative aspects of the pandemic hanging over us. And now potentially, right, the talk of recession. And again, companies just have one more reason to scrutinize travel expenses by their employees. So we will keep watching this in 2023.
All right. Thanks, Andrea. And now switching to another completely separate topic. This is a topic that I get asked about quite a bit from the media, and also when I'm at cocktail parties. Not that I'm at cocktail parties that often, but when it happens, people do ask me about these things. But recovering from customer service disasters, and we've seen some big examples, some very egregious customer service mishaps in the past year or so. And I do get a lot of questions about, well, how can X company or X airline or X rental car company recover from this? And the answer really we see in the J.D. Power data over the long term is that if you have a good brand, you will tend to recover. We've seen some really well-publicized customer service issues, people being assaulted on an airline, people's pets being killed. Not to bring up too sensitive a topic, but it does happen. And we do see those brands recover because they are consistently in the business of providing day-to-day service. And this is something, usually these things happen really outside the norm of, what anybody would expect. So, I get asked constantly, can these brands survive? And the short answer is yes. If you've got a brand that is strong and that you've got a customer service orientation. And Andrea, I'm going to get to the hospitality side in just a second, but the big swing factor that we see in the J.D. Power data is actually people skills, not necessarily the operational. Do I get from point A to point B? Do I get a rental car on time? Do I, am I able to navigate an airport quickly and safely and get through TSA in a reasonable amount of time? Those are some of the blocking and tackling that has to be done well. But it's really the people issues at brands that really do save them and help them recover faster from these customer service disasters. So you've got good people scores, and that takes a long time to develop. We've seen in the J.D. Power data that certain of our clients have had low people scores, low friendliness, low helpfulness, a low concern for traveler welfare. And they've decided to tackle those things, and they've spent quite literally tens of millions of dollars and years to build a program where they're basically informing their employees about how valuable it is to treat someone as if they are a valued customer of the airline or the rental car company or of the airport. And that seems to be the biggest factor, swing factor in how well does a brand recover, is having good people skills to begin with. But you can't turn it on like a switch. It takes an awful lot of things. And it also helps to hire the right people in the first place. Something we see continuously in the data. And some of those brands that have not done very well, who have had customer service disasters lately, do have those high people scores. And we would fully expect them to be at the top of the rankings again very quickly. So, Andrea, are there any, illustrative events that have happened in the hospitality industry where you've seen brands recover, and how did they recover?
Well, I not specific events related to any one specific brand, but we do know that the hotel companies, as a reaction to the pandemic, they did kind of loosen those cancellation penalties, and they really were there to help customers, get their money back if they had prepaid, or they would let customers cancel a reservation without penalty. And the hotel industry really did get positive accolades for doing that, right? And that was something that tended to pop up in the news right after the pandemic hit us in 2020. But overall, from a customer satisfaction standpoint, our data shows that, yes, you might be a hotel guest and you might face an issue or a problem during your stay. You might have something that's not working in your hotel room or a service problem. But if you report that problem, and when the hotel recovers from that and works with you to recover from that, guest satisfaction often can even be higher than it would have been if you didn't experience a problem at all. And so that recovery is, like you said, extremely important. And it does involve the company, right, treating the customer, as the most valuable customer, right? Hotels are, of course, for hotels, it's all about hospitality, and you would want to treat someone as if they were a guest staying in your home. So I do think when the hotel industry can do well there, it does make a big difference. It improves guest satisfaction, but it also improves loyalty and the chance that that guest will return to your brand.
Mm-hmm. And just to put a postscript on this, occasionally I'll get an inquiry from the media about which airlines, for example, are the most safe, are considered to be most safe, and which are considered to be unsafe. And my answer has always been the same in the over 2 decades of my doing this, being in this business, is they get very high marks for safety all the time, for one very simple reason. If the flying public didn't think that the aircraft or the airline was safe, they'd never get on the aircraft. You certainly wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't. And then plus the pilot wouldn't fly the aircraft if he or she thought it was unsafe as well. So it's sort of you've got to have that basic, those are the stakes that you have to come with in the game, is that you've got to get people safely from point A to point B. And the airline industry does that really well. And the last final point I put on it when I talk to the media about this is, the partnership that the airlines have with the aircraft manufacturers is fantastic. So that anytime something, God forbid, goes wrong and an airline, fails, crashes and has some other mechanical error that causes, a disaster or loss of life, the aircraft manufacturers are extremely good at reverse engineering. What went wrong? How did it go wrong? And how do we prevent that from ever happening again? And that kind of philosophy between the aircraft and the airline, aircraft manufacturer and the airline itself, has basically led to the situation that we have today, which is flying in an aircraft is much safer than most any other travel activity that you can name, including walking across the street. So, with that, that's my postscript, is that safety is kind of a given in the airline industry. You wouldn't get on an unsafe aircraft and someone wouldn't fly it. So they're all considered to be very, very safe. Well, thank you very much for listening to the JD Power Travel Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about JD Power and the travel industry and the hospitality industry in particular, you can navigate to jdpower.com, go to the upper right-hand corner, click on businesses, scroll down to travel, and you'll see some of the things that we've been doing over the last 6 to 9 months. And if you'd like to leave some questions for us, there's a little space in there to get in contact with us. Thank you.